Hello and welcome to today's Personal Development School YouTube video all about cultivating self-compassion and how self-compassion is actually a vital component of becoming securely attached. So in this video, I am going to take you through what this actually means. In other words, I think we get a lot of high level advice about why it's important to forgive other people or why it's important to be compassionate towards yourself. But it's like, what does that actually mean? And how do we do that? I feel like if we go into dynamics of thinking, we're just going to forgive somebody, I just forgive them, but we don't emotionally feel that way, then we're essentially intellectualizing the experience. It's like we're bypassing the actual work necessary to feel that way. And in the topic today about self compassion and how this actually relates to becoming securely attached, we're going to discuss the actual how using three major steps. And I think it's important to note too that a lot of people say you can't change your attachment style. But this is absolutely incorrect. In fact, you are not born with a specific attachment style. It is something that gets conditioned into you through a set of patterns you're exposed to over time. And leveraging those main components of how the subconscious mind actually gets reconditioned, we can learn to cultivate self compassion on the path to becoming secure. So first and foremost, the very most important thing in terms of self-compassion, we're going to say for the end, number 3, but a great starting place is our internal dialogue. So point number 1 here is that we want to learn how to cultivate self-compassion through recognizing our internal dialogue. When we grow up and we are exposed to a whole bunch of different patterns, okay? Let's say, for example, you are an anxious preoccupied and you have this inconsistency pattern, right? Where sometimes caregivers are really available, other times they're not. Well, what essentially takes place is that you learn, okay, well, I'm going to be emotionally abandoned at some point all the time, right? This inconsistency creates this dynamic of perceived abandonment. So through the repetition that elicits this emotional experience, the repetition of perceived abandonment that causes this panic feeling for you, it actually programs in this wound of abandonment. Let's look at another example. If fearful avoidants constantly grow up in a dynamic where they have to walk on eggshells all the time, or they're not sure, what kind of chaos is going to happen within the home, well, the repetition of the walking on eggshells is going to elicit this feeling of fear and confusion. And so the repetition of this can often cause a fearful avoidant to grow up feeling kind of unsafe in their environment in the home. And they may have an unsafety core wound later on in life. Now, usually we'll see that fearful avoidants cope very well with that unsafety core wound, but the way you'll know you have an unsafety core wound as an FA is if you find yourself constantly fleeing the scene of things, over fighting back or over defending yourself against small things, right? Fight response, flight response, freeze response, if you catch yourself freezing often. And then last but not least, our fawn response, our people pleasing response. If you have a lot of these 4F responses, you probably have a core wound of feeling unsafe. So why I'm telling you all of this is that when you grow up in a dynamic, which is all insecure attachment styles, you are either going to have wounds that cause you to be really harsh and critical in the relationship to yourself, in the way you think about yourself and perceive yourself after you make mistakes. Now, we can look at the different variations of this, right? Anxious preoccupieds, you're going to either have a not good enough core wound. Maybe you think you're going to be disliked or rejected all the time. Fearful avoidance often have an unworthiness core wound or an I am bad core wound, like worrying that people are going to think they're mean or cruel or a bad person. Like they really over guilt and shame themselves for a lot of things when they make mistakes. They're constantly trying to earn their worth around stuff. Dismissive avoidance, they have an I am defective core wound. And so they may constantly think that something's wrong with them or they're not capable at their core of making changes. And so all of these different core wounds for each of the attachment styles are going to cause you to be harsh to yourself in your internal dialogue. Because if you grow up in an environment where this conditions this wound in, I like to think of our core wounds as being like a tree trunk. And as you go up the tree, you have the tree branches that kind of come off the tree trunk. So you may have an I'm not good enough core wound, and that's going to cause you to think thoughts about yourself like, oh, I made a mistake and I'm an idiot, I'm a loser. I'm never going to be good enough at anything. Oh, my partner left me because I'm not interesting enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not funny enough. And you're going to have all these not enough thoughts about yourself. And it's because when we have core wounds, they act as this filter that we see and interact with the world through, or like a lens that you see the world through. And so if you are not aware of how sometimes cruel, quite honestly, your internal dialogue can be towards yourself, then it's going to be impossible to foster self compassion because if we're always putting ourselves down, seeing the worst in ourselves, beating ourselves up in our thinking, then we're actually causing ourselves to erode our own self esteem on autopilot through these subconscious thoughts. Now, the way I like to think of our subconscious thought versus conscious thought is a conscious thought is a thought that I am choosing. So, our conscious thought is with your conscious mind, right? Which is roughly 3 to 5% of how we believe and think and feel and behave in our world. And our subconscious mind has a lot of autopilot thoughts, right? And it's responsible for 95 to 97% of all of that stuff, how we think, feel, believe, act. And so you can know that you are in subconscious autopilot thought because you didn't think to think the thought. Okay. In other words, you didn't consciously analyze your thinking. You just thought on autopilot without actually like investigating your thought process or noticing. So, a really clear example of this is if you ever driven home from work and you like missed your exit because you were just off in thought, those are autopilot thoughts. Those are not thoughts you were choosing, right? Thoughts we are choosing is like maybe I missed the exit and then I said to myself, and I've worked on this, so I definitely do not do this as a person. I encourage everybody else to follow suit. But I might think, let's say in theory, oh, I'm such an idiot. I always miss the exit. I'm so stupid. I can't believe this. This always happens to me. If I have conscious thoughts, I might recognize that I'm doing that and be like, oh my goodness, I'm analyzing my own thought process. That's our conscious mind analyzing our subconscious mind. So I might analyze this process and go, I am going to choose to not beat myself up any longer about these small, silly things because I know this erodes my self esteem. And in fact, I am not stupid. I am smart and capable. And just because I missed an exit doesn't mean that I'm this horrible person I'm painting myself up to be. Human beings make mistakes. It's okay. So, fostering self compassion, one of the biggest places is point number one here is that it starts within our internal dialogue. It starts with us disrupting these old autopilot thought processes that are actually rooted in core wounds from painful past experiences or attachment trauma events. And it requires us to actually analyze our subconscious autopilot thought and reframe it to be kinder and more gentle towards ourselves. Now, the cool part about this is that part of how we reprogram these subconscious thoughts, we stop them from coming back, is to leverage repetition and emotion. So, if every time we catch ourselves being really mean or harsh or critical to ourselves, if we upgrade our thinking, right? If we use our conscious mind to recognize this autopilot thought process and we challenge it and we reframe, to be more kind to ourselves and more compassionate and remind ourselves that we're a human. We're going to make mistakes sometimes. Our job here on this earth is not to be a perfect robot. Our job here on this earth is to make mistakes and to learn from them and to recognize that it's okay to be a human being and make mistakes. And we're all going to make them. I make mistakes all the time. I'm sure you listening to this video too, do too. And that's okay. Good for us. We can learn, we can grow, we can, get curious about our mistakes and what is leading up to them and how we can evolve. But our job is to be compassionate towards ourselves when we make them and to move towards the solution for how we can change the mistake or recover from it instead of beating ourselves up and going back towards the problem. So that is point number one, compassion within yourself and cultivating it has to occur within the way you are thinking about yourself. And I want you to ask yourself the question too, like, how would you feel about somebody who speaks to you the way you do to yourself all day? Would you feel uncomfortable around them, insecure around them, afraid of them? And if so, these may be root cause reasons for why we numb ourselves all the time, avoid ourselves, can't sit with ourselves for too long, because what we're actually avoid sitting with is the cruel internal dialogue that's taking place if we have a lot of core wounds. Number two, self forgiveness. So, self forgiveness is something that we have to get really acquainted with at the level of when we make a mistake and how we can go into this place where we punish ourselves and our behaviors. Okay. Oftentimes when we're mad at ourselves. Okay. So let's say, for example, you had to turn in a report for work and you totally messed it up. You made a mistake. You forgot to turn in really necessary parts of it. And so you find yourself really beating yourself up. Okay. If you see yourself doing this, you may go home and be like, I don't deserve to cook myself a nice dinner. I don't deserve to live in a clean home and tidy my house. I don't deserve, sometimes we'll punish ourselves in our behaviors, or we'll do this. We'll go, my life sucks. Who cares if I eat an unhealthy mood? Who cares if I eat McDonald's on the way home? Who cares if I skip the gym or work out? I don't care about myself. And sometimes we do this from this place of like, we're being cruel to ourselves and we're kind of justifying not nourishing ourselves as a person because of a mistake that we made or because we feel bad. But if your negative emotions are dictating your behaviors all day long, you're going to end up disliking your life more and more. Because the reality is, when we are fostering our decision making process from negative emotion, so we're justifying skipping things that nourish us, we are justifying being cruel to ourselves or not taking care of ourselves or putting ourselves down. If we're justifying these things from a negative emotional state, then your actions follow, right? So if you don't think kindly about yourself and then you feel badly about yourself and then you behave badly towards yourself in your life, you're not going to see any momentum towards becoming more securely attached because you're going to be making your actions and decisions from this place of negative emotion, which is just going to fuel more negative emotion and become a vicious cycle. So it's really important that we learn to get into the experience. And I encourage this all the time inside PDS, like in the school. And like, I'm going to encourage this here all the time too. Do not judge yourself as a person. Do not just make it a golden rule. I will not judge myself. Instead, I will get curious about myself and I will inquire about myself. When we judge ourselves, judgment goes hand in hand with shaming. So if I go, what's wrong with me that I did that? I'm an idiot that I did that. Or how could I think something so silly? How could I be so stupid? If we get into this like judgment space, then our actions will follow that, which is our point number 2 here, right? The actions that follow. So then we will not act in a healthy place. If we get curious and we're like, why did I do that? What was going on inside of me when I did that? Was I afraid? Did I have some kind of fear or did I have some kind of unmet need that I wasn't taking care of in the first place? And if so, how can I meet that need now in a healthier way? How can I use this painful experience or this mistake that I made as feedback to grow or to learn or to address something that was going on inside of me that I prior to this moment may not have been aware of? If we get curious and then we nourish actions for ourselves to take care of ourselves, these are behavioral steps towards self compassion. So I'll just give you one last kind of like example on this point here. Let's say that I'm in a position where I'm supposed to turn in something for work. Let's pretend I work for a corporation and I have to turn in something for work and I just totally forget about the deadline. If I sit there in a meeting, I beat myself up and then I go home and I'm like, who cares about cooking dinner? I had such a terrible day. I'm just going to eat fast food and I'm just going to skip all my healthy habits for the evening because who cares? I am actively punishing myself. It may be framed as justifying eating fast food and not caring, not nourishing myself, not cleaning my house or cooking dinner or whatever. But I'm actively punishing myself through my actions. So it didn't just start from my internal dialogue as point number 1, but in my actions as point number 2. If instead I say to myself, I just made this big mistake. I totally messed up. I'm a human being and human beings make mistakes. Let me get curious here. What was going on inside of me leading up to this mistake? Oh, I've had a lot of poor boundaries in my life lately. I've been taking on too much. I'm feeling overwhelmed, so I'm more likely to forget things. Let me solve for that. Let me nourish myself and recover from this mistake by setting better boundaries in my life so I don't have to run into this mistake again. That is us compassionately targeting root cause, discernfully instead of judgmentally, deciding how we want to pivot and adapt and behave. And we're also less likely to have these experiences recur in later stages. So it's very important to dive into this. Point number 3. One of the most interesting things I learned in doing a lot of attachment based research, especially around children, is that one of the best ways to make a child feel worthy, okay, is to give them love for no reason. So this is, not giving your child love for when they got a good grade or when they scored a goal or when they, did something that looks cool. You don't give your child love just for these conditions that they show up for, but you give your child love for no reason. I mean, you're expressing behaviorally to your child unconditional love. So maybe your child's coloring in the corner, you go give them a kiss and a hug. Maybe they're just playing or watching a show, you just give them love for no reason. The more you do that, you're actually conditioning a child to think that they are worthy. Now, a lot of people have unworthiness core wounds growing up. I am unworthy because they didn't grow up in homes where this was a thing, right? Like, it's not that parents didn't actually love them the vast, vast majority of the time. It's that parents didn't realize the impact of constantly giving children love for the things that they did rather than for who they naturally were. And The impact and the way that conditions is for somebody to feel unworthy and insecure. And so, how do we reparent this within the relationship to self? And how is this a step towards tremendous self compassion? Well, it's to give ourselves love for no reason. So, I want you to ask yourself this question: what do you receive best as love from others? Is it words of affirmation? Is it acts of service? Is it, caretaking activities like, having a bubble bath? Is it you taking time to be present with yourself through journaling, through meditation, through personal growth work? What do you best receive? Well, sorry, I kind of merged the questions together. What do you best receive from other people? Okay. Is it when they are present for you, right? And then what we're going to do is we're going to flip it around and learn to give that in the relationship to ourselves consistently and without attachment to us doing something good. In other words, we are learning to give ourselves love for no reason in the way that we would want to receive it from others. And it's actually a way of reparenting this major core wound. So, with that being said, if you can figure out, hey, is it when people are present with me? Okay, how can I be more present with myself? Is it when people do acts of service for me, like draw me a bubble bath, cook me a nice meal? How can I do that for myself? Is it when people are affirmative towards me? They validate me, they acknowledge me and my hard work. How can I do that to myself? So, ask yourself that question. Have a daily practice to give yourself love for no reason. And through these major things, you're going to see that you are actually conditioning yourself to have more self compassion and more bandwidth, tolerance, and patience for yourself. In doing this, you're going to put a dent in reprogramming old core wounds. You're going to put a dent in also treating yourself with kindness behaviorally so that that becomes your new subconscious comfort zone, which our subconscious comfort zone very much decides what we invest in relationships with others. So if my subconscious comfort zone is kindness and compassion towards myself, I will not be attracted to people who are not kind and compassionate towards me. I won't have much tolerance for that. My alarm bells will go off and say, whoa, this feels unfamiliar and strange and not healthy. And so I'm not going to invest in relationships that are not healthy for me and that don't feel comfortable and safe and familiar in a way that I treat myself. If we have really poor self compassion and we're mean and we're cruel to ourselves, when somebody is mean or cruel to us, our conscious mind can logically be like, this isn't good. But our subconscious mind will say, but it's familiar and we're more likely to reinvest. So not only is cultivating self-compassion so important for the relationship to ourselves, but it actually has a huge impact on the way that we choose relationships with other people. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you want to do a whole deep dive into self-compassion, I actually have a whole course you can check out for free for 7 days called Skyrocket Your Self-Esteem. I'll put the link to that course down below. It has all of these major tools along with a whole bunch of other ones and a lot of detail in action steps, workbook format, and it's designed to help you see a major boost in your self-esteem within that 7 day period or less. If you decide you want to check out the course, explore it, and then you cancel before day 7, you will not be charged for anything inside PDS, but in that meantime, you will have access to all of our courses, including the self-esteem one, along with all the different live webinars and social event features that we have every single day inside the school. So I hope you enjoyed listening to this video. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here. Please like, share, and subscribe if you are enjoying this channel, or hit the notification bell or give me a thumbs up so you don't miss any daily content. And also the thumbs up helps me so much. And I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you so much for watching and for being here.